What an awesome ride! Whoever came up with this way of folding the seats. Damn it, I can't fit! How do you do this? It's not working, damn it. For crying out loud. My fingers! You see what the problem is? No matter what I do, I can't fully unfold the Niva seat. The hinges won't let it go that way. And it just won't fold this way. Was I right about patience? Let me know in the comments. I gave up. I'm not patient. But it's a Niva. This particular car is specifically made for exceptional off-roading capabilities and also provides incredible comfort. If I manage to easily fold down the entire rear bench, you will clearly see just how much the trunk space significantly increases. A whole 585 liters. I think I tore it off like this. So basically that's how it is. This is the most ridiculous way to fold the seats. No, of course, someone will say that with the old seats, but it's still nonsense. Oh, the hum of the axles, the tires, the joints. You are the world! And if Nivas ever stop humming, then they're not Nivas anymore. And so, once again, they're trying to bend us over. But I don't want to go off-road. I mean, who doesn't know how a Niva drives off-road? That means I have to engage the front axle again. I can't stress enough that the 1990s in our country were the most productive years. The automotive industry had every chance to reach a new level. Many genuinely tried. And the reason for all this was that almost all Soviet models had become hopelessly outdated. On top of that, foreign cars flooded our market, mostly used ones, of course. But that was only half the problem. Our brands like Volga, Moskvich and Zhiguli also started to lose ground in the export market, even though they were relatively inexpensive. The VAZ 2121 stood apart from all the rest. It was in demand and was purchased in almost every corner of the world. People bought it, and it was exported to more than 100 countries worldwide. And by the late 70s, for example, in Austria, 90% of all off-road vehicles were Nivas. To fully understand, it's important to remember that the VAZ 2121 didn't appear overnight. The creation of a car for rural areas began long before the party said it must be done. The first were at AZLK. Prototype models were already undergoing road tests, and everyone was waiting for an order from the top leadership. I've told you about these Moskvich cars. Here they are. The government realized the need for an all-wheel drive passenger car only at the end of the 60s and decided to hold a competition among our industrial giants, AZLK, IZH, and VAZ. I won't beat around the bush, you already know everything. VAZ 1. There were several reasons for this, but the main one was the high technological level and originality of the project. Plus, the tests showed just how much more adaptable, reliable, and most importantly, comfortable the Niva was compared to its competitors. At the time, the Moskvich 415 and the IZH 14. But to be honest, the IZH 14 wasn't much worse than the Niva, but Izhmash simply didn't have available production capacity. A unibody, metal-bodied SUV without a frame? Exactly. Had anyone in the world done something like this at the time? No, nothing like that existed back then. This was the first mass-produced SUV with a unibody design. An SUV? Yes, an SUV, even if it's a small one. The car is compact, but not at the expense of comfort. 3,720 millimeters in length, 1,680 millimeters in width, and 1,640 millimeters in height, with a curb weight of 1,150 kilograms. Another distinctive feature of the car was that almost all the components and assemblies of the VAZ 2121 were taken from the standard Zhiguli models. This significantly reduced production costs, and in the USSR, they knew how to manage money. Sometimes, admittedly, this led to unfortunate consequences, but that does not apply to the Niva. And here's something else. The Niva had front disc brakes, which was unheard of for off-road vehicles at that time. And do you know about the all-wheel drive system? It came from the VAZ. I'm not joking. It was precisely the development of the all-wheel drive transmission for the VAZ 500 that led the Togliatti engineers to the right solution. In a nutshell, here's what happened. Back in the 1950s, the Minsk automobile plant discovered that if you make the front axle disconnectable, its components and assemblies wear out quickly. The reason is that without a central interaxle differential, the axles are rigidly connected. And when there is a difference in the wheel's angular speed, say, when turning, a parasitic braking torque is applied to one of the wheels, and so on, which ultimately leads to breakdowns. Moreover, the driving wheels experience less rolling resistance than the driven ones. And to avoid such consequences, they implemented permanent all-wheel drive using an additional interaxle differential. This idea was brought to life by Petr Mikhailovich Prusov, the lead designer of the VAZ 2121 project. He also wanted to make the gearbox and transfer case a single unit, like in the UAZ. But the Italian comrades closely monitored the processes at the plant and did not allow any design changes to the gearbox. Stubborn foreigners! Of course, the 21 had its own signature components designed to handle increased loads. Strong forged front suspension arms and reinforced springs. The rear axle rested on springs, not leaf springs, as was common for off-road vehicles at the time. And now, to the point why all this fuss, and why am I showing you the Niva again? This Niva is precisely an attempt to find a way out of the situation in the country. There was no money, there was nothing at all. But the car still needed to be updated. This is the VAZ 21219, a transitional model from the magnificent to the strange. It has a 1.7-liter engine from the VAZ 21213, which at that time didn't even exist yet. The 21st was fitted with an engine from the VAZ 2106 and from the VAZ 2111 with a 1.3-liter displacement. They wanted something more powerful than the Shestyorozhka engine, but nothing else was in mass production. Togliatti engineers looked at racers, saw how they boosted engines and did the same. The press of those years wrote with great ceremony. The 06 engine appeared in a new form. Its displacement increased from 1,569 to 1,690 cubic centimeters, and the power rose from 75 to 81 horsepower. Of course, this was very pleasing. A whole 5 extra horses. But here, they used an electronic contactless ignition system, which simply drove the contact breaker with cams out from under the hood, as well as a new carburetor, the 21073 model from the Solex system. This solution made the car easier to operate overall, reduced exhaust toxicity, and lowered fuel consumption. That's what was written in the magazine Zarurum. I have nothing to do with it. I believe them. They also installed a new aluminum radiator. Its wider edge is good and cheaper to produce. But the nicest thing is that since it's narrower, the hole for the hand crank starter was preserved. No, actually, it's probably not a hole, it's an opening. Next, on the transitional model, you will no longer find a universal joint between the gearbox and the transfer case. Here, there's a constant velocity joint, whose design is similar to that of the outer joint in a front-wheel drive axle. This is an advantage, both when driving the Niva and when aligning the transfer case. In addition to this, they installed a different clutch, a reinforced intermediate drive shaft, inner oil seals for the front-wheel drive, and the final drive at the front and rear with a gear ratio of 3.9. The interior. Everything here is debatable. Some reputable sources claim, and I believe them too, that the interior was entirely from the VAZ 2121. But in photos from the same Zarulem magazine, you can see that the interior is already updated. By the way, when the instrument panel and various small parts were removed, it was clear that the entire interior, the whole atmosphere, was original and hadn't been changed. By the way, there is a theory though. It's not certain that the 219th was slightly modified during production. Otherwise, my dear Marquise, it is indeed a Niva as it is, truly. Alga. The car, as a temporary phenomenon, didn't stay on the assembly line for long. In 1991, pre-production prototypes were made. Mass production continued from 1993 to 1994, when the plant finally began producing the VAZ 21213. There were attempts to install 1.7-liter engines and GM injectors. There were even diesel modifications of the VAZ 2121. But the main focus still became gasoline engines, a slightly reimagined suspension, and a sort of new body with a strangely awkward interior. Oh damn, I almost forgot. This one already has a 5-speed gearbox installed. I've come across Niva 2121S with 5-speed gearboxes, but those were cars that were sold abroad. And here's my question. When the VAZ 2105 came out with its 5-speed, why didn't they install 5 speeds here at home? On the Nivas. Afterwards took a long time to get moving back then. And even today, they're not exactly quick to act. But here's what I'll tell you. If for some reason unknown to the people, the Niva turns into a rebadged Chinese car, or if the Niva is discontinued altogether, that would be a disgrace for the factory. But that's just my opinion, just like my hunt, which is still ongoing. All right. Oh, fuck! To hell with Isahaha. Fuck that.